From my home state of Missouri, Senator Josh Hawley joins us. Senator, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me, Dana.
Of course. I have to say, I was reading the plan that you have laid out on your website, and the thing that I like the most is how quickly you want to make this happen, and the job protection, and you also have a huge emphasis on medical supply chains. So let me start with this. When you hear your colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the Senate say, no, we can't reopen this quickly. It's better if we just maybe wait for a vaccine. I don't think that America can wait for a vaccine, nor do I think that they will. And economically, I think all that does is just make us weaker in this overall battle against not just the virus, but also against China economically. Give us your thoughts on this and how your plan is so different.
Well, I don't know how we could possibly sit around and wait for a vaccine. I mean, that could be a year away, Dana, as you know, and there's no guarantee that it would be immediately effective. I mean, listen, we've got to take all the steps that we can right now to get our economy reopened as safely and practically as we can. But we just can't afford to sit at home, and here's who the burden will really fall on. It's going to fall on the people who've already lost their jobs, who are working class Americans, blue collar Americans, the kind of people who power our economy in Missouri, frankly, the kind of people who are the backbone of our economy in this entire nation. They're the ones who are hurt the most. They can't telework. They don't just fire up their laptop and sit on their couch and, oh, it's all fine, I can do this for 2 years. They need to work. They want to work. They need to support their families. So that's why I think any further relief by Congress needs to be laser focused on jobs, getting people their jobs back, getting them the ability to work again. Even if you live in a state or in a city that isn't fully opened up yet, you can still get your job back and get ready to work, and that's what we need to do.
Right, exactly. So far, the package coming up from the House does not include any liability protection for businesses, which is going to be a huge problem going forward. And I feel as though Democrats have already saber-rattled on using that as some sort of tactic to intimidate business owners into staying closed. Is that a non-starter for you?
Oh, I mean, the House package is a joke. And at $3 trillion, the overwhelming amount of that spent on politicians. It's bailouts for politicians and special interest liberal groups. I mean, the idea that we would shovel taxpayer money at California and Illinois and New York to help them pay for stuff that has nothing to do with the coronavirus, while states like Missouri, that has a balanced budget amendment, by the way, and so Missouri's had to make tough choices for years about what we spend and don't spend. The idea that we would bail out these other states, it's crazy. I mean, that's just crazy. I've got zero interest in that, and I could never support that. What we need to be doing is focused on jobs. Here's the thing, Dana. The House package, it includes almost nothing for workers. I mean, all of this money for politicians and all these special interest liberal groups, I mean, page after page. And what do workers actually get? Just about zero. We need to get people back to work.
Yeah, we need to get people back to work. And I was looking at some of what was in this. I was looking at the proposal, and there's a lot of money, a lot of grants for special interest. A lot of lobbyists are getting paid in this bill. But as you said, there's no protection for workers, and furthermore, there's no protection for actual businesses either. The payroll tax cut, this is something that the president has demanded be included. That's not even a consideration, not even mentioned in this bill, Senator.
If they had the opportunity here, if they were serious, they being the House, to put something together that would actually save jobs that we still have, all the jobs that we still have, and then get folks rehired. Those who have lost their jobs, get them back on the payroll. And as you've said, I put forward a plan to do that, which, by the way, I think could get bipartisan support, not from Nancy Pelosi, but from reasonable people. And it's more than a payroll tax cut even. It's a payroll tax rebate that would act super quick, would get advanced to the business and allow them to keep on payroll all the employees they currently have and to rehire people that they have laid off so that everybody can get back to work. But the House Democrat leadership has no interest in this stuff. Their bill is the Full Employment Act for lobbyists.
Right.
That's what they want. That's what they propose. And that's going to go nowhere with my support.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear that. I also, I get that it's a weird position for businesses and even workers to be in, because it's essentially, and as I've been calling it, it's basically an eminent domain of the ability to engage in commerce. And to have that seized by the government, and then all of these individuals who need to have that income replenished, I don't think that there's any stimulus that is going to outlast this coronavirus, and nor should it. But even more, there is a greater incentive to not go into work as opposed to going into work, which then puts these businesses in this really odd position of having to be at the opposite end here with their employees. They need their employees to come back so they can fulfill the criteria of that paycheck protection loan. But then their employees want to be laid off or furloughed so they can still continue drawing from CARES and unemployment. Was that something, it feels like that was not foreseen. And I realized that there was a rush to get something done, something into Americans' pockets. How can we fix that? And how can we make sure we don't have other errors like that? And I think that's one of the things your plan also addresses.
Yeah, exactly. The best way to do this is to tell all of these businesses that have been shut down and the workers that have lost their jobs because of the government health measures to try to break the back of this epidemic, to tell those folks, listen, it's time to get you your job back. For the business who have been without revenues, haven't been able to be open for months, I think we should say to them, we will help you. The government that shuts you down and has cost you your business effectively is going to help you rehire your workers so you can get back on your feet. I mean, it's the least, frankly, that the government can do after telling all of these business workers you can't work, you can't pay your employees effectively. So I think we should say to them, we will give you a payroll tax rebate. We'll advance it to you. We will help you cover the payroll of the people you currently have on staff so you can keep them and so they can keep their jobs. And we will help you rehire the folks you've had to lay off, or for that matter, new employees, bring them on so the business can get stood up and get back to work. Because as you say, Dana, the only way we're going to power out of this is if we are able to get back to work and workers can get their jobs back. If you want to make the American economy strong, make the American worker strong. That's what we need to do. And no amount of bailout money to states and local governments for who knows what is going to solve that problem.
There's no reason that anybody else, any other taxpayer, should be paying for the financial malfeasance and impropriety from some of these blue states that, I mean, I grew up in Missouri. I've lived right next door to Illinois. You're obviously from Missouri. We've known for years how Illinois has operated. This state has had problems for decades. Since before we were alive, the state has had problems. There is no reason why they need to pretend, well, we were great until the coronavirus happened, so now we need a bailout. That's robbery. That is robbing the American taxpayer.
It really is. It really is, and they're barely even pretending now, these big blue states. I mean, they're just, the politicians in those states are just saying, just give us the money. Just take federal taxpayer money and just shovel it over to us so that we can get ourselves out of this jam. I tell you another thing, Dana, that needs to be part of getting our economy back up and powered on, and that is our supply chains. We have got to secure our critical supply chains so we are no longer dependent on China. We need to bring them back to the United States. We need to bring production back to the United States. I've introduced legislation that would do that, and I think that that is vital to our long-term economic health. It's also vital for our short-term recovery. We need to bring these things home.
Yeah, I completely agree. You had a really good piece that was in the New York Times. The WTO should be abolished in concert with other free nations. America must restore its economic sovereignty. We've seen Japan start to do this by spending I think it's the 3/4 of their stimulus, their pandemic stimulus that they've passed on incentivizing moving Japanese manufacturing from China back to Japan. How can we approach this in the United States? And we realize that it's going to be a slow process. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. And I keep hearing the argument, Senator, and we're speaking with Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, I keep hearing the argument from some that, well, no, it's good to have like a healthy commercial relationship with China, and you can buy this or that from China. But the more serious stuff, I'm kind of at the point where if we can incentivize and make it better for businesses here in the United States for manufacturing of everything, and I'm not just talking about our pharmaceuticals or anything that is related to rare earth minerals, etc., but everything, even like the cheap stuff that everyone wants immediate consumer satisfaction with. If we can incentivize that to bring it all back to the United States, that would be awesome. But how can we do that?
We need to bring as much production back to this country as possible, both for our national security and also for jobs. I mean, that production is jobs. Those supply chains represent jobs. I think the way we do it is a combination of new requirements for our essential industries, especially the medical industry, when it comes to antibiotics, when it comes to antivirals, pharmaceutical devices. We need to say to the pharmaceutical industry, look, you're just going to have to manufacture a certain percentage of those drugs and devices in the United States. It's just vital to our national security. That's what's called local content requirements. We should impose them. We should couple that with what Japan is doing, or a similar approach, and that is you give businesses incentives, grants, tax incentives to say, listen, if you onshore, bring it back to the United States, you'll get some benefit out of that. We've got to change the equation, though, Dana, because for too long, too many companies have either been pushed overseas because they just can't afford the regulatory system here in the United States, or they've gone, in the case of the big multinational corporations, they've gone looking for a quick buck where they think, you know what, I'm just going to evade U.S. taxes, I'm going to evade U.S. laws, I'm going to move all my production to China and pay nothing in the United States. That's just wrong. We need to bring that production back, and these big companies that are paying zero in U.S. taxes but making a killing in the U.S. market, they ought to actually be following the law and paying the taxes that they owe.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. One last quick question for you, Senator. I know you've seen some of the overreach in some other states. Missouri's been pretty good. Texas has been, for the most part, pretty good statewide. Some localities, we've had some issues with some elected officials. Los Angeles, they're going to be locked down until August. Have a very inconsistent rules that almost seem to purposely make it difficult for Americans to follow. You can, for instance, go to the beach, but you can't lay out on the sand. You can only do active things like surfboarding or, I guess, running on the sand, but not laying on it. Most people, good folks, have no problem with being voluntary good stewards of their fellow man and sheltering in place to flatten the curve, but we flatten the curve. And it's gone from flattening the curve to now we have to have a vaccine. And now it's, well, we have to basically have a cure and have the virus be 1,000% gone. This plus the overreach from some of these elected officials, this is how we end up getting problems. What is your take on the enforcement and the honesty that elected officials, and those even in law enforcement, the way in which they have interacted with the public thus far with these enforcements of social distancing and lockdown? And is it too far in your opinion? And what does that, I guess, ideal enforcement look like?
The pandemic should not be an opportunity for politician power trips, where all of a sudden these particularly executives now say, oh, in the name of public health, I'm going to take over your lives and tell you exactly what you can and cannot do now and forever. I mean, these decisions need to be guided about what is actually good for the people of these states and these regions. And a lot of these places, you look at like what's going on in various places. California, you named one of them, and you wonder, is this really guided by science? I thought we were supposed to be guided by science. Is this actually guided by science, or is this just about maintaining control and political power? I think what the state of Missouri has done is really the way forward, which is Missouri has been giving the local governments a lot of flexibility. The state of Missouri has now is doing a partial reopening, and they've said to local governments, if you feel like you're not there yet and you feel like the health data says it would be too dangerous, then you can stage the reopening more slowly. But the idea is to try and move everybody towards safely, but to try to move everybody toward reopening in a way that's consistent with health and safety. And, so far so good. I think that kind of flexible approach that actually responds to people's real needs, their medical needs, yes, but also their need to work and to provide food for their family, their need to be able to get out of the house and actually get rid of confront some of the isolation and problems associated with that we're seeing, like the rise in child abuse and the rise in domestic abuse. We've got to be mindful of all of these things. So I think a flexible approach that respects people's rights, that responds to the actual science, that's what we should be doing. But the power trips you allude to, Dana, that so many politicians seem to be engaged in, boy, I mean, that is something that has to stop, and I hope it's something that we won't ever see again like this in this country.
I'm right there with you. Well, I'm glad for your voice in the Senate, and I really do appreciate your economic plan, this phase 4 reopening, because this and the speed and also the reality that you approach just the real perspective that you approach this situation with. You can tell those in DC who have economic understanding and those who don't when you read the Democrat bill, and then when you read your phase 4 reopening and you see where the attention needs to go. It's very obvious. Senator Josh Hawley from the state of Missouri, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Godspeed.